Hi everyone, and welcome to Millennium Computers online 5-minute tutorial series. Today's course is going to answer the question, how do I use dynamic or function-based filters? So I'm going to cover a couple examples from different applications within FAST. Function-based filters are actually used throughout a variety of different FAST applications, so I'm going to cover examples from a few different places. First of all, I'm looking at FAST finance reporting, and this just happens to be my application info tab, but we could certainly do the same thing from one of the actual report filter options pages. Let me show you a couple examples. Now, first and foremost, I want to point out the function button. This is the small FX key that you see next to fiscal period. In fact, pretty much every fiscal period field in FAST Finance is going to have a function button. If I select it, I have a few different options. I have functions to pull in current fiscal year, current period, current fiscal year, last period, current fiscal year, next period, and I also have dynamic function-based filters for last fiscal year end and this fiscal year end. Now here's the big question. What is the difference between using a fiscal period of, for instance, February 2016 open and a current fiscal period in the form of a function? The key distinction is that if we use the function-based filter and save it as a pinned report, this report is never going to stale date. It will always do a quick little check behind the scenes or an algorithm before the report executes and pull me back current data based on whatever point in time the calendar says. In other words, FAST applies a bit of logic before it executes the report for me and brings back what I expect to see. If, on the other hand, I save a report using February 2016 as a hard-coded point in time, it will only ever bring me back results for that fiscal period. Let's do a quick example in the finance world and then also show you the same functionality from a different perspective. Let's choose something like last fiscal year end, just as an example, and pull that into the query. Notice my fiscal period has changed, and I could certainly also include a variety of parameters here to refine my query, or just go ahead and click enter. When my report executes, notice my fiscal period is currently looking at March 2015 as a year-end summary. Below this, you also see a function-based filter indicating to me that this is looking at last fiscal year-end. Now, an important distinction here is that if I move ahead 1 year on the calendar, this is going to bring me back March 2016, and so on. In other words, whenever I run a saved report using a saved function-based filter key, I'm always going to see relevant data, and it just saves me the need for having to go back to my filter options page and make modifications to my base query before I execute the report. And like I mentioned at the start of this tutorial, we could do the same thing from any of the filter options pages. If I choose the filter options, notice I have a fiscal period here. I could then choose from any specific point in time or click on the function key and pull in any of my function-based filter options. I would say probably the most common options here are going to be current and last fiscal period, but there may be a time and place for using any or all of these fiscal periods. Let's move on now to a different application to give you another example. I'm going to navigate us into the student reporting application, and I'm going to pick one of my registration reports. Let's select all registration records. Now on my filter options page, I have term or term code as one of my filter options that I can possibly use to refine this report. And obviously in the student world, this is going to be a field that you're going to see pretty often on a lot of different reports. Now I do have the option to go ahead and type in a term, or I can search for one using the magnifying glass. But I also have the option of using the function button. If I click on the FX, it gives me some different options than what we saw in finance. I could choose current term, I could choose terms this academic year, or I could choose terms this calendar year. I think probably the most common option would be terms this academic year, and that's going to pull in, based on my particular institutional values, all the terms that apply to this academic year in my student cycle. If I select it using the check mark, This particular report is now going to quickly and easily pull in 3 terms, not just one, into this report. Then, if I go ahead and execute that report and save it as a pinned report, once again, it's never going to stale date. It's always going to pull me back terms this academic year, no matter what point in time we're sitting at. It's always going to look at relevant data based on my institutional rules. Once I execute the report, notice I didn't include any other parameters, so my filter trail is just simply terms this academic year, and it's brought back, in this case, all registration records for all terms this academic year. I hope this has been a helpful, quick introduction to the use and function of function-based filters. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you again next time.